Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, we've got the stack right here. All the sources you sent over articles, reports, notes.
Quite a pile this time.
Yeah, it is. And our job, as always, is to dig in, cut through the noise, and really pull out what matters. See how all these different global events connect.
And it's a real mix today. We're going from big geopolitical moves, trade stuff,
Right.
to conflict zone updates, checking the economic pulse, some really interesting science and tech breakthroughs, weather events, even some culture bits from the U.S.
That's what I love about these sessions. You really see how it's all, tangled together. We'll pull out specifics, maybe find a surprise or two.
Hopefully.
And by the end, you, the listener, should have a clearer picture of what's been going on and, crucially, why it might matter to you.
Okay, let's dive in.
Absolutely. Let's kick things off on the global stage.
Right.
Trade, specifically, U.S. and EU. The sources highlighted a significant move regarding tariffs.
Right, the big headline is President Trump postponing that hefty 50% tariff on EU imports.
Postponed until when?
July 9th, 2025, so quite a delay. And the context given is this came after a call between Trump and Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president.
Ah, okay. So direct conversation led to this.
Seems like it. It basically opens up a window, right, for more negotiation. Because remember, those tariffs were supposed to hit, what, June 1st? Pretty soon?
Yeah, because talks had stalled. So this is like hitting the pause button.
Exactly, a pause button. And the material noted the EU reaction was, well, cautious optimism. They said they're committed to fast-tracking talks now.
I saw the market reaction. It was pretty instant, wasn't it? Positive.
Oh, yeah. European stocks rallied, the euro got stronger. It just shows how sensitive markets are to these trade signals.
It really does. But, even with that good news, the sources were quick to point out the uncertainty hasn't vanished.
Not at all. That's the key takeaway. The unpredictability of U.S. trade policy, that's still hanging over everything.
And it's not just about this one potential tariff, right? There's existing stuff.
Exactly. The sources remind us. U.S. tariffs on steel, aluminum, cars, still there. And the EU side, they've still got retaliatory tariffs suspended that's about $21 billion worth, but only until mid-July.
Mid-July, okay. Not far off.
And they're apparently readying potential new duties. We're talking about $95 billion of U.S. exports. Huge number.
Wow. So this delay helps someone like Germany, a big exporter?
Yeah, they got a specific mention.
But the bigger picture is still this kind of standoff.
Yeah.
Both sides ready to escalate, but maybe wanting to talk.
That's a good way to put it. And the EU's offer, to get rid of tariffs on cars, industrial goods, still on the table, according to the sources. This whole back and forth, the uncertainty it hits businesses, supply chains, and eventually it affects you, the consumer. Prices, availability.
Okay, let's shift focus geographically, but still North America. King Charles III visiting Canada.
Right. He opened the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa, his first visit there as monarch.
A symbolic trip, I imagine.
Very much so. That's how the sources framed it. A 2-day visit seen as reaffirming Canadian sovereignty, the constitutional monarchy.
And the timing's interesting, as the material noted, with Canada having faced trade pressures, threats even, from the U.S.
Exactly. So it highlights that unique Canadian position, balancing the U.S. relationship with its own history and ties.
But not everyone in Canada rolled out the welcome mat, according to the sources.
No, definitely not. The Bloc Québécois was quite critical, called Charles a foreign monarch. They actually boycotted his speech.
Really underscores those different perspectives within Canada itself about the monarchy, doesn't it?
It does. So you've got this symbolic visit happening alongside trade tensions and internal debates. A complex picture.
Okay, let's move now to conflict zones. Updates there, and particularly the humanitarian aspects mentioned in the sources. First, Russia, Ukraine. There was something specific about President Trump's rhetoric.
Yeah, this was flagged as quite notable. According to the material, Trump condemned Russia's intensified attacks and reportedly called President Putin absolutely crazy.
Wow. That phrasing, absolutely crazy, the sources say that's a rare kind of public rebuke from Trump towards Putin?
That's how it was presented, yes. And the context provided was important. This came after Russia launched what was described as its largest drone attack on Ukraine since the war began in 2022.
Targeting multiple cities.
Yeah.
Causing significant damage.
That's what the report said. So you have this major escalation and then this very strong language from Trump.
Did the sources mention the Kremlin's reaction?
They did. They mentioned the Kremlin defended Putin's actions, calling them necessary retaliatory measures.
So the sequence is intense attacks, strong words from Trump, Kremlin defends. The sources are basically reporting this dynamic, this potential shift in rhetoric happening alongside the fighting.
Exactly. Not interpreting motives, just laying out what was reported, the public statements alongside the military reality. It might signal shifts or maybe not, but it's a development noted in the material.
Got it. And another critical area highlighted was Gaza, focusing on the humanitarian situation.
Yes. The core point here is the UN's urgent call for a massive, immediate increase in humanitarian aid.
And this call is happening just as some new Israeli distribution plans are starting up.
That's right, involving a U.S.-backed group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. They've apparently started operations.
But it sounds like, based on the sources, this GHF is facing a lot of criticism.
It is, yeah. The GHF aims to get aid to over 1 million people, potentially replacing the UN's role, which itself has faced objections. But this GHF plan is running into resistance from Hamas and significant criticism from international aid groups and the UN.
What's the main criticism outlined in the material?
The core argument reported from aid organizations in the UN is that Israel and the U.S. are essentially using aid as a political tool here. And the sources note this whole situation has raised serious international concerns, even talk of potential war crimes, and just highlights the desperate, urgent need for aid. The UN reportedly slammed the GHF plan, calling it a distraction.
A distraction while the death toll keeps rising. The sources mentioned a figure.
Yeah, over 54,000 reported deaths in the enclave. It's just staggering.
Absolutely staggering. So a new aid mechanism is introduced, but it's immediately controversial, criticized by established international players, all while the humanitarian need is immense.
Precisely. It shows just how incredibly complex and politically charged even the delivery of aid can become in a conflict zone like this, based on what the different sources are reporting.
Let's try and tie some of this back to the economy. We mentioned the market reaction to the US-EU tariff news earlier.
Right. That positive jump in European markets, the investment flows into European funds. That was a direct response. Shows how fast money moves based on perceived risk, even temporary changes.
But temporary feels like the operative word there. The sources stress caution remained.
Absolutely. The rally was nice, but that underlying unpredictability, the potential for EU retaliation, remember that $95 billion figure, that keeps investors cautious. A delay is good, but stability is better.
Makes sense. And looking regionally, the IMF had an update on the UK's economic forecast.
Yeah, a slight adjustment. They nudged up the UK's 2025 growth forecast a tiny bit to 1.2%. from 1.1%.
Why the slight bump?
Strong performance in the first quarter, apparently.
Okay, so a little positive sign. But I'm sensing a but.
There's always a but with forecasts, isn't there? Despite the upgrade, the IMF issued warnings, pointed to those global trade uncertainties we just talked about.
Right, it's all connected.
And they specifically advised the UK government to refine its fiscal policies. Stick to the rules on tax and spending, was the message reported.
Why is advice like that from the IMF significant? What does it signal?
Well, the IMF is like a global economic watchdog, right? Their job is promoting stability. So when they give advice like stick to your fiscal rules, even with a small upgrade, it suggests they see potential risks down the road. Concerns about long-term stability, especially with all the global unpredictability. A forecast is just a projection. The warnings tell you about the potential bumps in the road to getting there. And that matters because the national economy affects everything. Jobs, services, your wallet.
Okay, let's pivot now. Science and technology. The sources picked up on a UN report about AI and jobs.
Yeah, this was pretty eye-opening. The report estimates that generative AI is set to transform about 25% of jobs worldwide. A quarter.
Transform? That sounds like a big number. Does transform mean displace?
That's the concern, yeah. AI boosts efficiency, no doubt. But labor groups, according to the report, are worried about job losses and the huge need for workers to adapt, retrain.
And there was a specific finding about gender.
There was. The report highlighted that women's jobs are apparently at a higher risk of being automated by AI compared to jobs typically held by men.
That's a really important nuance.
It is. So this UN report matters because it gives us a sense of scale, that 25% figure, and flags potential inequalities in the impact. It really highlights the need for, policies, education, proactive measures to handle this massive shift.
Switching gears within science, but staying with public health, some positive news from the UK's NHS. A vaccine.
Yes, a plan to roll out what's being called the world's first gonorrhea vaccine.
Wow, a vaccine for an STI. That feels significant.
It really does. The vaccine itself, it's called 4CMNB. Reported efficacy is around 30–40%.
Okay, not super high, but...
But, the sources suggest, if uptake is high enough, It could still prevent up to 100,000 cases over 10 years and save the NHS a fair bit of money, too, over £7.9 million.
That's still a major potential impact, both health-wise and economically.
Definitely. And it could, pave the way for more initiatives like this globally. The plan is for local sexual health clinics to contact eligible people with vaccinations starting around early August, a concrete step.
Okay, let's turn to nature's power now. Some significant weather events were in the sources. Flooding in Turkey.
Yeah, severe flooding reported, significant damage, buildings collapsing, communities affected.
And this wasn't necessarily an isolated event.
No, the context provided was that it's part of a pattern of climate-related disasters in the region. Heavy rains triggered floods in Bescal, an eastern city. There was a detail about a woman being rescued there.
Events like that really force conversations about infrastructure, resilience, climate adaptation.
Absolutely. The human cost, the damage. It's a stark reminder of vulnerability and the need to prepare for more intense weather.
And closer to home for many listening in the U.S. tornadoes in Tennessee.
Yes, reports of tornadoes hitting parts of Tennessee, including Nashville and nearby areas. Widespread damage.
Did they confirm how many?
The material mentioned storm survey teams confirmed 5 tornadoes from one specific storm system on a Tuesday. It also noted other recent damage in May in Murfreesboro from strong winds and a downburst. So multiple severe weather hits lately.
And obviously, emergency responses underway, damage assessments, highlighting those specific places like Nashville, Murfreesboro, and the number of confirmed tornadoes really drives home the impact.
Definitely. Shows the localized destructive power and the immediate needs of those communities.
All right, let's wrap up with a couple of items from the U.S. focus section in the sources, culture, and commemoration. Memorial Day observances.
Yes. Marked across the U.S., of course. Parades, ceremonies, honoring service members.
Any specific details mentioned?
Yeah, the Manhattan Memorial Day Parade in New York got a mention.
Yeah.
Started at 10 a.m., marched up Fifth Avenue. Mentioned marching bands, military units, veterans groups, floats. The whole picture.
A significant national moment of remembrance.
Exactly. Reflecting on service and sacrifice.
And on a different note, the American Music Awards.
Right, the 51st AMAs. Held in Las Vegas, hosted by Jennifer Lopez. The sources specifically pointed out her opening performance.
What's special about it?
Apparently, she performed a medley of 23 songs in just 6 minutes. High energy.
23 songs in 6 minutes?
Yeah. Included her own hits like Dance Again, but also tracks from Billie Eilish, Kendrick Lamar, Bad Bunny, Tinashe. Quite the mix.
That's quite an opening act.
Definitely a way to kick off a major music awards show, as reported.
Wow. Okay, so we've really covered a lot of ground today. I mean, from global trade jitters and conflict zones.
Yeah, all the way to economic forecasts, AI's impacts, that new vaccine.
Severe weather, and even cultural moments like Memorial Day and the AMAs.
The goal, as always, was just to pull the key insights from all that material you gave us, connect some dots, and hopefully help you feel a bit more informed.
Absolutely. And thinking about everything we've touched on, that UN report on AI potentially transforming a quarter of jobs, the sheer unpredictability in global trade we saw with the US-EU stuff, the IMF urging caution on economic management. It leads to a final thought for you, the listener. Looking ahead, based on what these sources are telling us, what do you think presents the bigger challenge for governments, for individuals to prepare for in the next few years? Is it the massive technological disruption, like from AI? Or is it more the economic uncertainty that seems so driven by the political factors right now?
That's a tough one. The sources show they're both huge, and they're linked, aren't they? But figuring out where the primary focus for preparation needs to be, that's the big question.
Something to definitely think about. Thanks again for diving deep with us today. Keep exploring, keep connecting these dots.
Until next time.